This is a Law for Community Workers podcast, and Legal Aid New South Wales would like to acknowledge that all our podcasts are recorded on Aboriginal lands across New South Wales. We pay our respects to all traditional owners and custodians of those lands and extend that respect to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners joining us today. Always was, always will be. Welcome to our new series, Till the Violence Ends. All information provided in this episode is correct at the time of recording and should be regarded as information only and not legal advice. Please see our show notes for a breakdown of the episode, along with information and links to resources mentioned throughout. Till the Violence Ends will be an ongoing series for community and support workers to gain insight from experts found in domestic, family and sexual violence services. We will cover a different topic each episode and will speak with specialist guests on that topic who are working towards eliminating domestic violence in all its forms. Through their work, our guests continue to shine a community light on this ongoing crisis. These episodes may contain details of violence, so listener discretion is strongly advised. For our first episode, we are starting with Program and Policy right here in Legal Aid New South Wales, and our guest is Bev Lazarou from the Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Program, or WDVCAP, and what role this team plays in supporting the numerous WDVCAS, which is the Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Services throughout New South Wales. Thanks for joining us today, Bev. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here.
Thank you, Bev. I've briefly mentioned in the introduction how the WDVCAP is a program policy part of legal aid that supports the WDVCAS, which is the Court Advocacy Services throughout New South Wales. Can you please expand on that and just talk to us a little bit about your role in that and the role of legal aid in general?
Thanks, Pauline. Happy to do that. The program consists of 27 WDVCASs, that is the Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Services across the state. And then we, the unit, as in the Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Program, sit within legal aid and provide oversight for those 27 services across New South Wales. The services cover every town, every local court in New South Wales that deals with domestic and family violence. It started in 1996, so well embedded in the system now and extremely well known throughout the sector and throughout the judicial area, with police who we work hand in hand with in supporting women and children who are going through this process. But in 1996, when it started, we really only did court work, as in supporting women and children at court who were applying for apprehended violence orders, related charge matters in regard to the domestic violence that they were experiencing. And that was really the extent of it. It was pretty short and sharp in terms of the contact and the support and liaison that was offered. We supported them through that court process and then made referrals out for their ongoing social and welfare needs. But of course, in the last very many years, the program has expanded significantly. We do so much more work that I'll talk about shortly. But the unit at Legal Aid oversees the services, as I said, provides that program management in terms of the funding. We have two teams within the unit, the policy team and the mentoring team, which I manage. And the policy team does what you would expect, I suppose, overseeing the contracts, policies and procedures, liaising with service providers, because WDVCAS workers are employed by service providers in the field. They're not employed by us or by the organisation. We provide that funding to those service providers to then provide that service in their local areas. So
sorry, Bev. So does that mean legal aid plays the role of like what we would call an auspicing body in that respect?
Yeah, we're the funding body, I suppose you'd say, where that funding is passed down through Treasury and DC to DCJ, and we oversee those services and ensure that the funding's spent in the way that it's supposed to in regard to the contracts that we have with those organisations. A lot of different organisations across the state are the service providers, from community legal centres, family support services, some of the bigger charities like Catholic Care, and there are a few WDVCASs that are independently incorporated and have their own boards, but they still all work under the same sort of contracts and policies and procedures. Like, we want to drive that consistent service provision across the state. So the policy team also feed into law reform issues and work with other areas of legal aid in that regard as well. They've currently been looking at the changes that are to be made to the Domestic Violence Safety Assessment Tool, which is a common assessment tool that police use in the field when they're attending domestic violence incidents, or when people come into police stations to report domestic violence. We promote that common risk assessment so that we're all kind of talking the same language, and we can all assess the level of threat in the same way. In terms of my team, we provide that mentoring support to the workers on the ground across New South Wales. Pretty unique sort of service that we provide, because it probably is a bit unusual for a funding body to also have a mentoring support aspect to it. But I've been working at Legal Aid since 2007, where I was invited to try out a mentoring role for the workers who worked in the services, and it was subsequently seen as being successful, obviously, because I'm still there. And now I have 4 other mentoring staff that work in that team. So we provide support to the workers on the ground in relation to their practice in the field. So about their relationship building, this work can't be done successfully, and we can't provide the best possible service to clients if we're not working effectively and positively and closely with our partners. And that generally is New South Wales Police, it's local courts to some degree, of course the community sector in those local areas of the state, the legal fraternity to some degree, and of course, our organisation, Legal Aid. We work really closely sometimes with the practice areas in legal aid as well. Again, we aim for that consistent service delivery so that it doesn't matter whether a woman is going to court in Tweed Heads or she's going in Albury. She's going to get the same service when she comes to court and the same opportunities for her. We also provide training to our workers across the state. Currently, we probably have about 500 workers in the field, and we're in the process of developing some online training modules so that managers can better manage their teams. Because the work has grown significantly, teams in the field have grown significantly as well. So when the program started, when I first started as a manager of a WDVCAS in 1996, there was just coordinator positions. That was just us. So we had to develop close working relationships with local solicitors for support, and try to ensure that people could access some pro bono representation and some assistance. And we also had to work very closely with the community sector locally so that we could have workers seconded to assist us at court on AVO list days. So it was very different in those days, and that we didn't have the paid workers that we have today. So now we've got all of those workers. We provide that training. We're going online with a lot of those modules, as I said. We also provide training on a regular basis to New South Wales Police. I present at their prosecutor training sessions. We have some of our workers in the field who attend police training at the academy when they're doing courses for domestic violence officers. Any opportunity that we have to work with people in that collaborative way in promoting the work and ensuring that we're working together, we take those up, because it makes a difference to people on the ground, to our clients, to women and children that we're supporting, because you're harnessing the specialist work that police, do, which is more around enforcement and looking after perpetrators of violence. And we do the other side of the work in terms of supporting the victims and plugging them into services that more properly support them going forward. So a pretty broad range of work in terms of training. We also do 2 training sessions for safety action meetings, and safety action meetings occur every fortnight in every local area as in police command and police district. So those safety action meeting coordinators sit with our WDVCASs in the field. Those safety action meetings are for people who are assessed at most serious threat, and they're attended by government organisations that deal with domestic violence, so health, corrections, education, DCJ child protection, and DCJ housing. And then a number of non-government organisations might attend those meetings as well, and they will depend on who has capacity and who's available in those local areas. But those meetings occur locally across the state every fortnight. So we provide training for people who participate in those meetings. We do 2 training sessions every month for SAM participants, and we run about 40 or 50 each session in terms of attendance. So it's quite broad and fairly extensive, the training we do. Ad hoc training as well for our WDVCASs according to need in what they require on the ground in their local areas. I think that's about all we do in terms of training. I think the other thing that we often get involved in are working parties and opportunities to liaise or provide information, feedback to other pilots or services that are running in other government organisations. That's fairly constant. Our manager sits on the Domestic Violence Death Review Board, so they meet fairly regularly to discuss domestic violence homicides. We do attend a lot of higher level police meetings to liaise with police at that management level, again, to kind of feed into the work that they do so that we're working hand in hand with them.
That's an incredibly impressive list of works, Bev. But I did hear you mention earlier something about a practice team. Could you just expand on that a little bit for us and tell us what their function is or their role?
Sure. The practice team consists of 4 other project workers and myself. Each of those project workers has oversight of a number of the WDV CASs, so they have their own services that they effectively oversee. And they also share a rostered job within the unit where they are on the phones each day to receive through the system the referrals that come through from police where victims live in other states. So those those calls, those referrals come through to our unit so that we can make contact with people interstate and ensure that they are given information about services they can access. And they also troubleshoot for the WDV cases on the ground. So if they have any issues, either with the database and the systems they record on or in their practice in the field, they will often ring that particular number we have to ask questions or get feedback or some support around those issues that come up for them in the field. So the practice team is involved in all of the things that I talked about before, but they also have a role on a rostered basis every day to ensure that we're connecting with the field and that we're available to assist them with the work they're doing from day to day.
That's amazing, Bev. It sounds like the WDVCAP program does a lot more than what a normal or run of the mill sort of auspicing body does. So, um, those are the services within, but how does the WDVCAP program actually oversee the CAS services?
So when the mentoring staff visit the actual WDV CASs in the field, they usually will observe an AVO list day in practice at those local courts because that's a good way to see how things are operating. They'll attend the local safety action meetings in that area. They'll meet with the teams at their offices. They might also meet with local police or other community sector organisations. So they'll get a real handle on what's happening in that local area to assist them with their practice. They also provide feedback to managers when they submit their 6 monthly reports about the work that they do. And I've mentioned this before, but they troubleshoot, address local issues. We would then in the unit push those issues up the line if we need to with other departments and in a sort of more senior management way. We also have forums for our workers. So for each worker group, that is the specialist workers, the focus workers that focus on Aboriginal women, multicultural background women, women with disability, LGBTIQ plus communities, and youth and older people. We have forums for all of those different workers, for the hearing support workers, for the co-location workers. It seems like they go on forever. But we run those forums every 2 months online so that our workers can connect and network. We'd have guest speakers in those forums as well on topics that are relevant for them. And again, we, the practice team, convene those forums so that those workers are able to raise issues in that setting as well for us to follow up in terms of their practice. And the other things, I suppose, just briefly, in relation to the database and file keeping systems, we assist with those and always updating policy and procedure manuals and so on in relation to the work.
That sounds amazing. I'm going to ask you in a moment about some pilots, but before then, would you just briefly talk us through what actually is a DV list day at the local court and what that means for a domestic violence court advocacy service team?
Thanks, Pauline. Yes. AVO list days at local courts is usually in the metro courts, there are some very busy list days. In country and regional areas, the numbers aren't as high, but an AVO list day is really where AVOs are listed for mention to either negotiate those AVOs and the conditions on the AVO with the perpetrator or the defendant who is required to attend court as well. So on those days, the victim survivors will come into court and usually be directed to a safe room within the courthouse. In some of the little country courts, they don't even have a safe room, so they have to make other arrangements, whether they sit even outside in the yard or in the police station or an office nearby. But where there is a safe room, they wait in there. Our workers sit in that safe room with them and will go through their conditions on their AVOs, ask for some amendments to those if they're not suitable, because it's important that AVO conditions are suited to that individual's needs and are tailored to make sure that they meet those needs, because if they don't, the AVO won't be as effective and people are less likely to use them as well. Once they've had those conversations with clients, they will have had phone contact with the clients before court, because we receive all of the referrals from New South Wales Police in their entirety. So as soon as that officer finishes their shift, if they've dealt with a domestic violence matter, they effectively push a button and that referral is pushed through the system to our WDVCAP. So we receive every single one of those, and contact usually is made within the next business day with that client. So they'll have had conversation on the phone, but it's always good to have people attend at court because we can make sure those conditions are suitable, that we've got their most up-to-date instructions. We can make referrals, other referrals for them in terms of their other needs, whether it's counselling, housing, financial assistance. We can ensure that all of that is done. And so once the workers have spoken to those clients in the safe room, the police, the domestic violence officers who are working on the day as well and would be working very closely with the WDVCAS, they would then talk to the defendants about the conditions on the AVO. There might be some negotiation, toing and froing. An example of that might be where he may say, and I will always use gendered language because our clients are women and children. He might say he wants to go to the school to watch the kids play sport. And if that restriction's on the order, they might alter that if that's not an issue. So there might be some negotiation there. And of course, the goal is to get a final order as soon as possible so that you're having less trauma for people going through that court process. If that final order isn't negotiated on a list day, then the matter might be set down for hearing at a later date where all the parties will come and give evidence, and then the court will determine whether the AVO is made or not on the balance of probabilities. There might be charges attached to that AVO as well, which will be dealt with usually on the same day, and those matters will run, alongside each other until their finality. So those condition sheets will go into court to the prosecutor so that they have the information they need to present to the court.
Thank you so much, Bev. It sounds like it could potentially be an incredibly intimidating and daunting experience for clients. So I'm really grateful that our listening community and support workers now maybe know a little bit more about that process for their clients on a list day. I'd like to move on now to the pilots we previously mentioned because they sound incredibly innovative and potentially game changing for the domestic, family, and sexual violence sector.
Thanks, Pauline. Yes, very happy to talk about the pilots. These are really exciting and innovative initiatives. The first one is co-location, and that is where at 10 locations we have a WDVCAS worker sitting in the police station. They sit with the general duties officers or with the domestic violence teams usually, and their role is to see women that come into the police station to report domestic violence. So usually they will talk to them before the police do, unless there's something more urgent that, where someone needs medical attention or the police determine that, they need to get involved immediately. Usually the WDVCAS worker will talk to that person first. And that again is about utilising, the specialist skills of those workers. Police obviously are trained in terms of law enforcement. So I think it's a great combination to have workers in there that can talk to those people as they come in and prepare them, talk to them about what is involved in making a report to police. And then they may decide at that time that they're not ready to do that. Of course, they can do that, but WDVCAS workers would be encouraging people to make reports if it was safe to do so, and they were comfortable with that.
Is it looking to be a successful program at this point?
It has been really successful because having clients talk to those workers first up means that they're getting better information, more detailed information. Women are often disclosing more serious offences to those workers as well. They're also helping with misidentification. So if there have been women who've been arrested and brought into police stations as defendants because they've been misidentified at an incident, and then having talked to the worker, sometimes in the cells, that person might walk out of the police station with an order for them because they're identified as the primary victim in the matter. So the other spin-off effect is that those workers can also talk to police, be a liaison, if you like, where police want information about particular referral services in that local area. The sort of social welfare information that CASs, work with every day, they can give that information to police as needed. We've had police request them to be there more than in business hours. We've had police bring clients back to the station because this was originally for people who walked into the police station. It was a death review team recommendation to police
Oh, okay.
because sometimes when women were coming into police stations, they weren't being responded to very quickly. And, they would sometimes decide not to then report, they'd walk out again.
Mm.
So having someone there that could talk to them straight away and in the way that we would do that work certainly has had a positive effect on people.
Yeah.
And it's really important for those workers to be able to work within that police environment as well. We're working in quite a highly charged environment. They're doing difficult work all of the time. So workers have to be able to absorb some of that, I suppose, if you like, and make sure that they can still work with those clients in that space and work hand in hand with police. So I think it's sensational. I think it is a true collaboration, and it's about you know using the specialist skills of both those organisations in the best possible way.
Wow, that sounds like such an amazing program, Bev. Thank you so much for talking to us about that. And I'm sure I speak for most, if not all, of our listeners when I say that I just hope this goes from strength to strength and that the pilot becomes more of a permanent thing. And we really do look forward to hearing more good things from that.
Yes, yes, agree. It's being evaluated currently that by the University of Wollongong, and we should have a report by the end of this year. So yes, we absolutely have our fingers crossed for that continuing.
And the second pilot is?
And the second pilot is hearing support, and that's where we have a hearing support worker located at every WDV CAS. Those workers are particularly focused on preparing women for hearing, and that is engaging early with them. So, right from the beginning, when the matter's mentioned at court, they would start to engage if the matter's listed for hearing. So, they would be encouraging them to attend the prosecutor clinics, which generally take place monthly and are held at the local court. So, people whose matters are going to hearing for an AVO and or related charges will attend that clinic. WDV CAS worker will be there and a police prosecutor will be there so they can talk to them about the process of a hearing, so that they're prepared for the day. Many times victims of domestic violence have never been in a court before, never set foot in a courthouse. So it's a quite an intimidating environment, and courtrooms, they're not really set up in a supportive way. They've been more built and set up for dealing with offenders. So it can be a scary thing, as well as having to face the perpetrator of the violence as well. So a prosecutor will just take them through the process. They'll might do a little tour of the courtroom so that they can see, who's who and what's going to happen. They've got an opportunity to ask any questions. So it's good to do it in a group because people can, obtain information from each other and see that they're not alone in the process. The prosecutors usually will take some time after the clinic's finished to talk to people individually if they want to talk about their own matter, which is also useful. Police they don't have a lot of time to prepare clients for these matters. It's difficult, to get any time before the hearing starts with a prosecutor. So clinics are a great way to try to familiarise people with the environment and with the process. And then those hearing support workers will be in contact with the person right up until the hearing. They'll attend court with them on the hearing day. And the outcome of that has been that if we can get women, often these matters fall over or, are not successful at court because women don't come, and it's too frightening. They don't want to face the other party. The whole idea of giving evidence and talking about very sensitive and personal information is too much, so they don't show up. This pilot has shown very clearly that if people are supported and come to court, it has made a massive difference to successful outcomes, because the defendants then, even defence solicitors, in seeing that the client, the woman, is there, they will often then enter into negotiations. So it's been very successful in just getting people through the doors of the courthouse. Then if they do have to give evidence and go through the process, that hearing support worker can be that liaison between the prosecutor and the victim. And prosecutors have absolutely taken it on board. They love it because it's another person that can be that middle person, providing information back to the client, toing and froing, so that they can concentrate on what they're doing and support them through the hearing process. So really excellent as well, and that has been evaluated. The University of Technology, Sydney UTS, did the evaluation of that pilot, and that report is online and available for people to have a look at if they want to.
Just a quick reminder to listeners that we will have those links in the show notes for you as usual.
Okay, that would be great. I think in terms of hearing support, that is, it's an area that we didn't have the resources to provide workers at hearings. Resources really were for AVO list days, and we didn't have people to attend on other days. And it is a really critical time that here, it's the pointy end, and it's often the thing that traumatizes people the most, having to go over their evidence, having to be cross-examined by a defence lawyer. It's hard going. So having a family member or a friend there, of course, is supportive. But if you've got a professional person there that can manage the activity and what's going on at court, it makes a huge difference. We know that people give better evidence. They're more confident in giving their evidence, and as well, they're more likely to return to report again if the process, even if it's not successful, if the process is supported properly, they're more likely to come back to report again.
Oh my goodness, what an amazing program.
Yeah.
It just sounds like such an achievement to get all the players from all the parts on the same side. That, well, not necessarily the same side, but
Yeah.
to have everybody on the same page at least
Yeah.
is an incredible achievement. Such an impressive program.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It sounds amazing. Our time together is almost at an end. We only have two more questions for you. Bev, you've worked in this sector for a long time. You've recently won the Premier's Award for Public Servant of the Year, and a heartfelt congratulations to you for that. What are the changes you've observed in that time for the betterment of domestic and family violence services during that period, during that time?
Yes. Thanks, Pauline. I have worked in the sector for a long time. Extremely positive changes in the sector. Of course, we still have a long way to go. We should always be open to new ways of doing things better, listening to each other within the sector, and to obviously listening to victim survivors as well, so that we can always improve. But when I first started working in domestic and family violence in the 90s, early 90s, maybe late 80s, police didn't take out orders in those days, not really. I was working in refuges and women's housing, supported housing back then, and we would be at the courthouse asking for registrars to take out applications privately through the registry. But now, about 98% of applications are police initiated, so very few private applications now. So that's a massive, shift. It's been that for quite some time now. Police certainly have given great priority to domestic violence in the last many years. So that's a big shift. And of course, it being treated, I suppose it wasn't treated back in those early days as a crime so much. It was considered a bit of a relationship, behind closed doors issue. Certainly not that now. And so we do get many more people reporting, as you said before about the stigma, it has removed some of that stigma in terms of reporting, because domestic violence crosses across all socio-economic groups. It can affect anyone at all. So that is a massive positive thing. The Safer Pathway initiative that commenced in 2014-15, state government initiative, which is a different response to domestic violence, a more coordinated response to domestic violence across the state. where those referrals, all matters that are reported to police, go through a platform, an electronic platform, and are speared out to WDVCAS immediately when those reports are entered into the police system, and they are sent out via postcode so that the WDVCAS nearest to where the victim lives gets that referral so that those people can be plugged into services that are most appropriate and local for them. And then following on from that, of course, we've got information sharing legislation that allows for, in serious threat matters, people to share information about those domestic violence matters and that history. That is amazing because it means that we're not working in isolation, in silos, as they say, anymore. And that makes a difference when we can share that information. So, Safer Pathway is about that safety assessment tool that I mentioned earlier, about the domestic violence safety assessment tool, where they assess the threat, and that involves asking a number of questions and using their professional judgment as to whether someone is at serious threat or at threat. So every referral goes through the system, but the serious threat ones are referred on to a safety action meeting where all of those other agencies come together with police and the WDVCAS to discuss those particular cases and offer a safety plan to that client. And then they decide of that safety plan what they wish to take up or not. So Safer Pathways has been an amazing initiative that's firmly embedded now, and it's had a spin-off effect in that all services have better knowledge about each other. Police understand the sector a bit more, and the domestic violence sector understands the way they operate as well. So that shared knowledge means people know each other better. They can work together more effectively, even outside of that process. All of that means that we've had a substantial increase in service demand because we've got more people, reporting. So we've had a massive growth in terms of WDVCAS workers. As I said at the beginning, we had 27 managers initially, and now we have around 500 workers. So that's amazing in itself. There's much better collaboration between agencies and services now. Government certainly has, prioritised domestic and family violence as an issue. When I'm talking about change from when I first started, it's right up there in terms of priority and exposure. AVOs can now be registered across all the borders in Australia. So if an AVO is made in New South Wales and someone moved to Queensland, they can register that AVO and it can be effective in that other state. We've got coercive control as an offence now, which is really, a grouping of domestic violence behaviours, but it's an offence in itself. WDVCAS have been working with women on all aspects of domestic violence for a long time, but now we have a separate offence that incorporates probably the less violent behaviours that can be grouped together, if you like, and so that's another tool, I guess, in the police toolbox. We've got electronic monitoring of offenders in domestic violence matters when they're bailed, if or when they're paroled. So that's another protection for people. And Staying Home Leaving Violence as a program sort of got underway during that time as well, even though it's been going for a long time. And it's for women, of course, who want to remain in their own properties and assist with security upgrades and so forth. So lots of real positive change. And like I said, of course, we've got a long way to go. There's still women being murdered, and we've got to always think about how we might do things better, more collaboratively, and always be open to that.
Wow, that is a big list of observances from you, and incredibly grateful to hear about them. And I agree, we are all working towards better and better service delivery, and ultimately, obviously, towards the elimination of violence in all its forms. Um, that is the end of our formal questions. There is one last question, and it is quite simply, Bev, what's the one thing you would want listeners who are caseworkers, support workers, community workers, what's the one thing you would like them to take away from our podcast today, from the information you've given? What's something you would like them to carry with them after listening?
Oh, so much. Look, I hope that today hopefully improved people's understanding of the work that we do. That's useful. And of course, always feel free to contact your local WDVCAS or the unit if you've got any questions in regard to the work, in regard to domestic and family violence. Always happy to talk to people about any of those issues. But for me, I think what I'd really like people to understand is the importance of relationships in this work, the importance of collaboration, working together with all of our partners, so that I know I've talked about it through the podcast, but so that we can harness our specialist skills and the different things and the different ways we come at this work together. So you have to develop and maintain really positive relationships with your key partners always. And if you have that, you can achieve so much. I can't stress that enough. And it's something that I've learned over many years. Focus on people's strengths and their different agencies, the different roles, what they can bring to the work. Meeting clients where they're at is also so important. We're not walking in people's shoes. So it's not for us to tell people what they should be doing, but rather to offer appropriate information so that they can make informed decisions themselves about what they need to do for themselves and their family, their children, respecting those decisions. Because even if you don't agree with what someone decides to do because of your experience as a worker, because maybe to do with your own biases, you need to respect the decisions of the people that we work with, that they need to make a decision based on where they're at this time. Always make sure that the door's left open so that people can report again. Make sure that they're always respected, that they always feel they can come back and talk to you again. People shouldn't ever feel judged and never feel told about what they should or shouldn't be doing. And the other thing is the impact on children of domestic and family violence. My personal view, you can't work in this field and not consider issues of child protection, because those kids are the collateral damage in all of this. And often our focus is on the primary victim or the offender in these matters. So it is so important that we consider the needs of children, make sure that they're referred on, make sure that they're considered, even in taking out an AVO, because children are impacted significantly, either directly or indirectly, by the violence that they witness. And we need to always have that in the picture as well. I've certainly seen over my time the generations of people who are victims and offenders. I've seen those young people sometimes grow up and be victims and offenders when they've grown up in families where domestic violence has been perpetrated. I've seen lots of young men at court where AVOs have been taken out on behalf of their mums, where there's been a violent male in that family who's no longer there, but that young man is mirroring that behaviour that he's learned growing up. And certainly that woman does not want to be there at court with an order against her child. So that generational stuff continues. We've got to intervene a little bit earlier in relation to these matters where we can, so that people have some more sort of information and education about respectful relationships early on, to the level of their understanding. So I know that's a lot of kind of thoughts, but
It is a lot of one things, yes.
yes, a lot of things. They're the things that, for me, relationships and collaboration are at the heart of everything. That's where we can work best. And all those other things kind of feed into that. There is a website that probably we could add to the list, and it's a government website. I'll send it on to you, but it's domestic violence website that has everything in relation to safer pathway, the information sharing legislation, a whole lot of information. So absolutely invite people to log on to that and have a look at what's there. Yeah, I think that's about all I've got to say, Pauline.
Well, I really appreciate your time today, Bev, and that information is incredibly helpful, I'm sure, to our listeners. And I'd just like to say again, thank you for coming onto the podcast. Thank you for your time today. You have been an absolute wealth of information, and thank you for sharing your history in the sector with us, and for giving us all those really useful points of service that are available, and the pilots, and just everything that WDVCAP is doing.
Thanks, Pauline. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
That was our guest, Bev Lazarou, from the Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Program here in Legal Aid New South Wales. This has been Till the Violence Ends. If you or someone you know is being impacted by domestic, family or sexual violence, please call the DV hotline on 1800 65 64 63 or 1800 RESPECT. That's 1800 73 7732, or the men's line on 1300 78 9978. In any emergency situation, always please call 000. Thank you for listening.